Well, from his just published secular outlook on how the world will look in the next 3 to 5 years, PIMCO CEO Mohamed El-Erian says, it is a world where several governments and advanced economies opt for financial repression and mild inflation as the major way to accommodate their deteriorating debt dynamics. It is a world that heals slowly and unevenly and remains structurally impaired. Well, joining us now from Newport Beach is PIMCO's CEO, Mohamed El-Erian. Mohamed, great to see you. And as I was joking about before, I don't have Tom Keene's connections. I can't get Rex Ryan for you. But I'll try to make it as fun as I can in the next few minutes. What do you mean by financial repression, and why is that going to be a key phrase for us in the next 3 to 5 years?
You know, the basic issue is that there's still too much debt in the system. We haven't yet sorted out the debt issue, the debt overhang. Now, like individuals, governments can do three things. They can either grow their way out of debt. That's unlikely in the U.S. without what we call the Sputnik moment, which means structural reforms. They can impose austerity, they can tighten their belts, or they can default. But governments have two other possibilities that they can also have that individuals do not have. They can inflate their way out of debt, and they can impose what's called financial repression. And financial repression is very simple, which means that the government ends up paying savers less than the rate of inflation and slowly overcomes its debt issues by recapitalizing because it's paying a negative real return. We've seen this happen in the past, and I suspect it will be attempted in the next 3 to 5 years.
And that's why you see advanced economies, particularly the United States, growing at just 2% then.
Yeah, unfortunately, if we don't get a real, what we've called a grand bargain in the advanced economies, they are looking at sluggish growth, persistently high unemployment. And the reason is simple. The U.S. has a number of structural issues that have to be addressed, including dealing with a very large and worrisome unemployment problem. Europe has its own set of structural issues that are highlighted by what's happening in the periphery. So you need big structural reforms. The political system right now is not amenable to that. You see this in terms of the talk on the debt ceiling, etc.
Right.
In fact, we live in a very polarized system, so we are unlikely to get the sorts of reforms needed.
Well, I was going to say, because Mohamed, in several op-eds that you've published, you've basically written that you don't have much faith in this grand bargain, let's say, on the debt issue here in the United States. You're not seeing that in Washington.
Not yet. There's some talk of it. We're seeing some progress towards mini bargains, but not the grand bargain that's going to be required. And the grand bargain has to say, this is the destination, this is what the journey looks like, and you know what, we don't need to agree on every step, but let's get going before the problem gets worse.
So in your portfolio then, Mohamed, I'm going to ask you how you play this then. You know, this scenario, and we know you've sold out of treasuries, you hold a lot of cash. How long are you going to hold your cash for?
Well, first you've got to recognize our secular is a 3 to 5 year outlook. Think of it as saying whether the freeway is heading north or south. It doesn't tell you what lane you should be in. It doesn't tell you what speed, but it gives you a sense of general issues that should guide your portfolio construction.
Okay.
Among those is 1, minimize your exposure to financial repression. 2, get ready for mildly higher inflation. 3, recognize that we are living in a global world, which is a multi-speed world. So while the advanced economies are going to hobble through, as we called it, the emerging economies are going to continue to do well. So this is a global marketplace, and investors should take advantage of these multi-speed dynamics rather than be harmed by them.
But Mohamed, just give me that one, the financial repression, playing that. How do you play that exactly then?
You look for economies that are not going to impose financial repression because they have sound balance sheets, because they're growing. And if you look around the world, there's many that meet that. You can go to Canada, you can go to Australia, you can go to a number of emerging economies, and you can be paid. In the United States, look for sectors that are not imposing financial repression. We have very strong multinationals today. Top-line revenue growth, strong balance sheets, cash, on the balance sheet. So
Right.
there's lots and lots of opportunities out there if you
Okay.
understand what game is being played.
We are back with PIMCO CEO and Co-Chief Investment Officer Mohamed El-Erian, Mike McKee joining me as well, and also Dominic, because this time we're going to be talking about the IMF and also just sort of the outlook on the global economy. And Dr. El-Erian, I know that yesterday, I think it was yesterday, that you had written out some comments saying that you're worried, right, about what has happened at the IMF, the scandal with Dominique Strauss-Kahn, and the impact on the global economy. Exactly in what way?
Well, this stunning development could not have come at a worse time. The IMF is like an army, and the general is very important in that institution. So the IMF is involved right now in the debt crisis in Europe. Newly democratic countries like Egypt are looking to the IMF for help, and you need the IMF to coordinate this global healing. So it's the worst possible time to lose your general.
But do you seriously think, though, that the commitment could be any less by the IMF, or that on the flip side we could actually see a country default because of what is going on here?
Don't underestimate how important Mr. Dominique Strauss-Kahn has been to getting all of Europe on the same wavelength. There's many different views in Europe, and Mr. Dominique Strauss-Kahn, with his political prestige, has been playing the role of conductor, getting everybody to play from the same sheet of music. Without him, it's going to be much more difficult to coordinate the European governments.
Dr. El-Erian, it's Dominic here. One of the things, let's talk about the leadership aspect. A lot of talk about what's going to happen with the top there. Could there be somebody else besides a European or an American kind of floating around here? Let's put it this way. The IMF and the World Bank, both heavily, very heavily funded by the United States. Is it conceivable that emerging markets will play a greater role in terms of leadership there if they're not footing most of the bill?
Dominique, the rule that the head of the IMF should come from Europe and the head of the World Bank should come to the US made a lot of sense back in 1944, because those were the economic powers and the political powers. Today, the world has changed. I think the critical thing is to have an open, transparent, and merit-based system. Let that be the guide, and then see what comes up in terms of nationalities, rather than turn it around and choose the nationality first and then look for the person.
Well, Mohamed, it's Mike McKee. I did a lot of reporting on the issue yesterday, and of course your name comes up as a potential leader of the organization. We had Bill Gross on yesterday, and he was very Sherman-esque, speaking of generals. He said if nominated, he won't let you run. If elected, he won't let you serve. What's your feeling about that?
I am very happy here in California. I have one of the best jobs in the world. And the one thing that I would like to see is a process rather than speaking of individuals. I think that talking about individuals, for example, the Prime Minister of Germany saying Europe should retain this role. Other people saying it's the turn of emerging economies. Let's talk about the qualifications needed, and let's talk about who out there meets these qualifications. It is a critical role at a critical time for the global economy.
Right. And he's in California. Why leave California? It's sunny there. But Mohamed, before we leave you, though, I just want to get this straight, though. Are you saying that because we don't have Dominique Strauss-Kahn at the IMF, there could maybe be a greater chance that a country could default, or a restructuring package may not happen because he's not there to shepherd this? Is that what you're saying?
That's exactly what I'm saying. And I'm saying in the specific case of Greece, where the IMF has played a critical role, the probability of Greece having a debt restructuring and a debt default has gone up after the stunning news on Saturday.
Mohamed El-Erian, thank you so much for joining us. Hope it was fun. The CEO of PIMCO and also the Co-Chief Investment Officer out there in Newport Beach, California.